Welcome to This Is Our Earth podcast. I am Sylvia Puentes, and I invite you to these amazing conversations that explore the wonder and magic of connecting with our beautiful planet. Inspired by Lugar, the place, originally a book by Gary Douglas, and now being actualized on our earth as we speak. What can we each be that would create a sustainable living earth? Hello, everyone, and I am delighted to present another beautiful being. I have the pleasure to interview some beautiful people, and today we have Georgia Watson. And Georgia, thank you for saying yes. Thank you for bringing this unique topic to our show. And would you introduce people a little bit about you and what you see as a contribution to our Earth?
I would love to. Hello, everybody. So I grew up in a couple of different places, but I started out in Hawaii um, and then also moved to the Oregon coast when I was 10 years old. And what both of those places had in common is the nature was far louder than the people.
Wow. Yes. As soon as you said Hawaii, I perceived ocean. As soon as you said Oregon, it was like the mountains and the trees.
Yeah.
Wow.
And we were on the ocean there as well. And the nature there was just so loud. And I would do my darndest. I would do my best to try to connect with people, especially people my own age. And it wasn't the easiest thing in the world. But my mom and dad were so kind in that they always made sure that I had so much nature around me, and also animals. So I think one of the most beautiful ways to connect with Earth is to just kind of like imagine the planet if all the people disappeared for a moment and it was just you there with the planet. It's like, what would that sound like? What would that feel like with your body? What would it taste like? And then if we can bring that to our daily lives and like bring that to right now, even if those silly people are there.
Wow. It's such a different space to perceive the planet and the earth with what you just invited us to. There was actually a level of I'd say silence and stillness, but yet it's not still and it's not silent, but a different kind of stillness and silence.
Yeah, it's probably that stillness and silence that people who meditate for years and years in caves are looking for, but then they go back down into into the city to get food and, or the local town. And then they're like, oh no, I've lost my spirituality. I better go head back up to the cave. See how right it is to be in a cave.
I love it too. One of the things I know about you that we haven't tapped into quite yet, but is this new venture you have with including the earth in what we're choosing, not
Yeah.
to include in our lives, but with food.
Yes. Yes. There was this idea that started tugging at me after I had seen a few of these documentaries that have just been really powerful, and not the kind of documentaries that make you feel down at the end where you learn things about the earth and then it's like despondent and sad, but these documentaries where you do learn things about how the planet's working and what's going on, and present possibilities for what can be different and actually bring that energy of hope and possibility as well. So this idea sort of came to me about including the planet and the future. So the future can include, gosh, what does the future include? So including that with what we're eating.
Yes. And I'm delighted to explore this topic because I know you have things in creation and you've invited me to start. You didn't even invite me directly, but it was out of what you were choosing that I started to go, what would that be like to choose to eat different? So can you speak a little more about this journey about eating and approaching food different?
Sure. Well, I think a lot of reference points that many of us have about, let's say, vegetarian eating or vegan eating is a very fight based reference point. So people are looking at, let's fight the current system of how animals are treated and don't support them with your dollar. Eat plant-based. And then there are these documentaries out there called, there's one called Kiss the Soil, and it also talks about how agriculture is really depleting the soil and leaving it uncovered, which allows carbon to escape into the atmosphere, um, but also for the soil to lose its richness, being uncovered and being tilled. So if you look at that too, it's like even plants that are created to be crops for us to eat, that also isn't necessarily being farmed in the most honoring way of the earth. So if we throw aside the diets and the ways we're supposed to eat and the right ways and the wrong ways, I mean, even that in itself, getting rid of all of those things, that's kind of a big topic. Because when have you ever heard anyone talk about ways of eating that's actually everything's included, everything's okay, but what choices can we make that are actually more conscious instead of more right?
And that's actually, in a sense, very such a different perspective. And I thank you for that. Because as you mentioned vegan, as you mentioned these different ways of eating that have these, labels, and there is an energy that comes up, either what I've heard people say or my own resistance, like, I'm not going to, do this for that reason because it's tied up with, like you said, I had never considered with that fight energy, the resistance, and this different approach of going, wow, if everything's included and nothing's right or wrong, what then is the question, or what then do you seek?
Yes, and that's such a beautiful question. It's a natural progression for someone who's inquisitive and curious, like you, Sylvia. I'm so glad that you're leading this podcast in such beautiful places with all of the guests that you've had on. And I would start to look at then, what does your body know? What awareness does your body have? I mean, even if we look physically, like our body is composed of elements of this earth. And when our beings move on, our souls, our spirits move on, our bodies get to go back into the earth as well. So what if our bodies are totally conscious? And what if having access to the awareness that our bodies have is actually an easier way of existing than what we have been trying and trying and trying again to do?
Wow. Again, there's this energy as you speak of that matches the first, as you started the show with, to imagine the planet with no one on it, but, or when you mentioned Hawaii, when you mentioned Oregon. So I wonder what this new conversation or perspective of approaching the way you eat and food can actually generate this different energy on the planet.
I wonder too. And I mean, one of the big things too is to get out of judgment. And, that can be easier said than done. But if we're not judging what we're putting into our bodies, even though that is culturally what we're supposed to do, family, what we're supposed to do, I mean, so many reasons why judging what you eat is correct and right.
And I think I just mentioned to you recently that, I was at the market and I've had, like, what has it been, 4, maybe 5 days where I've kind of explored, being different with the food that I eat. And but going out to the market where my eyes go to what it usually goes to, there's maybe sausages and chicken or certain things that I got, and it's been
You
so
gotta have the sausage.
you gotta have some sausage. And it's almost like you gotta have meat. Like how
Yeah.
embedded that is, even from a child. My father, hunted, and we always had meat. Somehow meat was the some way to demonstrate or show that you were wealthy and you had food. Like if you had meat, you had money. And
Yeah.
this is kind of a very poverty mentality, perhaps, but because coming from a very poor family from Mexico, they used to make tamales. If people don't know what those are, some of a dough with ashes. Ashes were the flavor there, and they still are made to this day, and they're called ash tamales.
Wow.
But that is really where people were looking for some kind of flavor, because corn was abundant, but meat and other things weren't. So when you
Wow.
have meat, it definitely adds to every meal. And if you don't have meat, you're not Mexican almost. And that might be a stereotype, but I'm speaking from my childhood. Is so for me to be at the market and go, and then it really was like, no, actually, but it wasn't a fight. Actually, now that you mentioned this, it wasn't the energy of fighting. It was simply, oh, no, there really is no desire of my body to have that. So, can you speak
Wow.
about this, building this muscle of awareness of what your body actually truly desires to ingest? That's,
Yes. Yes. Well, there are a lot of things that we eat in order to prove stuff, like you mentioned with the family and having meat. Actually, it wasn't necessarily even including what the bodies would like. It was to prove that there wasn't lack. And anytime there's proving, it's because there's that underlying point of view that the opposite is true. And then also what foods mean to us. So we brought up a lot of these topics, and there are a few tools that I have been playing with recently that help you and help people start to kind of disassemble what food is proving, what it's meaning, what the function of it is in our lives, and then letting that dissipate and actually finding out, asking the body questions and finding out what it desires, what it requires, what it would be able to gift to you if you consume it, if
wow.
you ingest. And
That's
that whole idea of consume brings up so many energies, because what if we could actually generate the future of the planet while still consuming the planet?
that's beautiful.
Not consuming it in totality for it to be less, but still allowing ourselves to ingest, because there's so much built-in wrongness. Like if we didn't have to eat, wouldn't, would nature thrive more? It would have more available. That's not really a question.
Wow. I'm kind of a deer in headlights right now with this last piece. It's like, wow.
Yeah, and we're taught too that what humans are doing or what people are doing on this planet is consuming it, and that is what the problem is. So underneath it all, there are seekers of the world. There are people who are looking to have and be a difference, and we're taught that any kind of consumption is the wrongness of us. But
Which
if
is that energy of fight again and not actually
yeah,
the question.
yes, exactly, the conclusion that eating is wrong, we're wrong, everything's wrong. But coming around again to the possibility of being able to listen to your body more, there are so many tools out there, especially with access consciousness, that when you apply them, you can have more awareness. And one thing that you can start with is even just acknowledging with this question: can can I actually be more aware of what my body is communicating with me?
Mm-hmm.
And would you be willing to give yourself permission to not make you wrong for any of that previous communication that you may have ignored or not listened to or put aside until later?
Wow. We'll make sure to add that to the notes. Because that question has no judgment in it. It's like, okay, can you? Well, yeah. And then the next question that shows up is like, well, how? Like,
Yes.
where do I begin?
Yes. Well, a beautiful place to begin is asking a question. So there are some really beautiful tools in access consciousness about asking your body, like, body, do you desire to ingest this? And a lot of people will find that if they hold, say you have maple syrup in front of you, and you hold it in front of your body, and you can ask, so body, truth, do you desire to ingest some of this? And your body might lean forward. And if it kind of goes forward for a lot of people, that's a yes. And then if it leans back, that tends to be a no. But you can also still be in question with that body. Is this a yes for you? Is this a no? So this can be a little confusing if you've never tried it out before, or even if you have. I will totally admit that I thought that I was listening to my body for a long time. And then I realized I was actually doing a really brilliant job of convincing myself that my body was asking for things that I wanted to eat or ingest or drink or whatever. But I found a tool recently that Gary Douglas has been talking about for years and years, but I only recently allowed to like really enter into my awareness. It's like I'd been pushing it out. But my partner Brett was talking about this way of eating that Gary Douglas had introduced years and years ago, and and I unfortunately was standing up at the time. So it was harder for me to override my body's movements. And my body flung forward. When he asked, he said, "Do you want to do this with me?" And I couldn't deny it at that moment. I had first, I didn't even know what the way of eating was. I didn't know what he was talking about. I wasn't prepared for the question. I had no barriers up to looking at this. He was coming off of the cleanse he was doing. He was looking for a new way of eating. So I wasn't even like paying attention hardly to the conversation until my body went forward.
And
And
that's
so,
the gift.
yeah,
I mean, you've said a couple elements like, no barriers up. It's almost like you weren't in your head thinking about the right or the wrongness of what he was suggesting, but there
yeah,
was a space for your body to totally indicate what it desired.
absolutely. And I have to be totally honest here. The first, like, my face just went into the most contorted, upset position. I was like, no, I like eating what I want to eat. What is this thing? Like, I went into like a lot of reaction.
Wow. And Georgia, I just got to kind of tie this in also to this conversation and the creation and actualization of this beautiful resort, El Lugar. Um,
Yes,
and how different, I mean, you're talking about food and ingesting and our choice and our awareness of that. El Lugar is, as you're speaking about that, I go, wow, this project El Lugar is having that conversation with the earth, that space of not having any conclusions or barriers of how things should be built, where they should go, when. I mean, all the details of construction and planting, and they're actually asking and listening, allowing the earth to be that sway or that indication of what's actually going to contribute to it and the future. Exactly what you're saying. So it's really beautiful that, one of the things I'm appreciating of these conversations we're having on this podcast is that sometimes we think it's so far away from us to contribute to a sustainable future. And yet it our actions every day, whether it's eating or some of the other conversations we've been having, it's like, wow. So thank you for tying all that in and really seeing like, wow, I can perceive actually a future available as we begin to have these conversations that perhaps wasn't available before. So,
yeah. It
and
is so beautiful, the gift that Elugar is. And you can bet that a lot of people have had resistance and reactions to a lot of these different areas. I know that there have been different architects brought into the job, and that idea that the building should be available and strong and sustainable for at least 100 years, but to not look like it's new, to look like it's 100 years old. Do you know how many people that's offended? It says this reality. I mean, what it's doing, it's like looking at what's right in this reality is contemporary, and what's popular now is what's right.
yeah.
And something that doesn't look totally like it was created this year is wrong. And that creates a future of consumption from degeneration. Because as soon as something's out of style, well, what do? You renovate, you put more money into tearing something down, bulldozing something, rebuilding it. And I just love how offensive El Lugar is to unconsciousness.
Wow. So would you say this approach with, you mentioned the documentary Kiss the Ground, I believe. And would you say this approach even to food and eating can be offensive?
Yes, definitely. And that's the first reaction that I had. And if had I not been standing up and I'd have been sitting down, I think I could have like pulled my body back, like used my muscles to kind of override it. But there was something about being standing up and just in that position where I was like, and also knowing, when even though it's like not something you want to know that but you still know. It was one of those where I was like, wow, I have to, if I would be robbing myself of something that would create greater if I didn't choose it. So that day, we called a friend who'd been playing with this way of eating for a while, and her enthusiasm, the first 5 minutes, I was like, oh, good. First of all, alcohol wasn't being taken away. Candy wasn't being taken away. I could eat as much as I want. There are a few things where I could hold on to these ideas and I was like, oh, good. Okay. Like I'm going to be okay.
Yes.
And that's what's so strange. That's what we do with food sometimes, but it's okay to have these kind of baby steps or to nurture yourself or make sure that you have some things that taste really good while you go through this transition of potentially listening to your body, sometimes for the first time ever.
And that's the gift, this building of the awareness of your body, you, the planet. I'm all like, what can we totally be different on this planet now that
Yeah.
would allow all of us to continue to enjoy the beauty, the wealth, and the food and all the nurturance that's available. So thank you so much, Georgia, for these. I'd say the beginning of so much, for sharing that with all our listeners. Is there anything else you'd like to say, or add? And we'll add some notes and how people can reach you. But anything else you'd like to end the show with?
Yes. What if taking things away and excluding things from your life isn't the answer for gaining what we'd like to gain? And if we can add that sweet willingness to listen to our bodies and listen to the earth with no judgment, the way that it listens to us with no judgment, what would that create for the future?
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much, Georgia. I look forward to more conversations with you
Oh,
on the.
yes, we'll have more. I'm looking forward to it too. And thank you so much for this beautiful, beautiful podcast that you're creating with the earth and with Lugar. It's such a gift and really, really fun conversations too.
Yes, and for everyone that's interested and curious with more about Georgia and what she's creating on this topic, we'll add some links. And please invite anyone that you know that this might be an inspiration or the spark of choosing something different to contribute to your body and the planet and our future. This is our Earth. Thank you so much, everyone. Bye for now. Thank you for listening to this show. My target is to inspire new actions and conversations that empower us all to know that we are the ones creating the future. If you'd like a way to contribute to our podcast, please leave a review wherever you listen. And for information about Lugar, visit l-lugar.com. Thank you.